We have arrived at the final episode of the final Candy Montgomery miniseries, maybe? Question mark. Final episode of Love and Death called Shh is here. I'm giving my thoughts and reactions right after the jump. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Episode 7, final episode of the miniseries. I thought it was 8 originally, so you might have heard a couple times where I thought the last episode, or I thought this would be the penultimate episode. Nope, 7. We're in and out. This one is called Shh, which is a key term and phrase and piece of this case, and probably a little bit of why Candy was able to get the verdict that she received. The thing about this episode is that if you were following this, or if you look this up at all, you sort of already know the outcome. So you know the finale of what technically happens in this. It's more about the character beats that happen around it. And as I suspected, you do get a full-on visual representation of the incident that occurred in that laundry room. Pick up at the end of the last episode where Candy was about to be called on to testify. She's still drugged up, but it's now or never. Don tells her, like, hey, this is it. You're in or out. We're about to go do this. For a while there, she doesn't seem like she's hearing it. She's off in her days, kind of recreating and remembering some things that happened that day. But then they make the walk, and she is put on the stand. And essentially, Candy, Don is going piece by piece with Candy about the incidents of that day, about the happenings of that day, from where she woke up, what she did, when she went to church, was why she went to Betty's home to get the swimsuit. He's basically establishing a line of, hey, she was going about her normal day, everyday things. Nothing about this says, hey, you know what? I'm going to walk over to Betty's place and murder her with an axe. That's what he's establishing with that. And they go on and go on. He's like, at no point he gets to the actual incident. And she's like, once you get the axe, why didn't you leave? And she says, and because this is my point, that's what I said in my video when I posted about this. I was like, hey, if she was a black woman, she would have got the hell up out of Dodge. She thought, hey, in this, she may have gone to go get some of the letters that she and Alan had been sharing back and forth, because now that she knows, there may be some proof that she has to show him. And she's like, okay, cool, I'll hang out there. And when she saw the axe, she still at no point still didn't register her that Betty was going to try to kill her. And then they went through their first couple of incidents with the axe. She put the axe down and picked it back up. Still, nothing there said that she thought she was going to be killed. It wasn't until Betty swings the axe, which she spills with all of her force, and knocks her upside her head and then kind of cuts her toe. That's when she was like, okay, I may be in danger. She still feels at that point, hey, I can get out of this. I'm fine. So she swings the axe and hits her back and gets a pretty good blow on her. And at that point, she says she thinks Betty's dead. Betty's laying on the ground still, not really moving. She tries to leave through the garage. She opens it for a bit, and then Betty kind of slams it closed and comes back to. And at that point, that's when Candy's like, okay, I'm not going to be able to leave here. And she goes into fight or flight mode. This is what she's saying. She goes into fight or flight mode. And Betty at some point says shh to her, because Candy keeps saying, I don't want him, I don't want him. She's like, shh, which we'll get into, sort of triggers a response from her. And then she realizes she's not going to be able to get out of this, and she just goes for broke and snaps and just starts slashing and hacking away. And we see it all. And it is, whew, boy, it's a rough watch. It's brutal. It's brutal in the fact that this actually happened. That's what makes that brutal. Like, it sits with you. There's a weight to it. Unlike a lot of times when you see something like this that happens in a horror movie or something like that, you're like, these are fictional characters. This is something that you're seeing recreated, and you're like, this is how it actually occurred. And there's a weight to it. There's a gravitas to it. Like, it just makes you feel gross in the pit of your stomach. What Don sort of keeps getting out of her is that she was afraid that Betty was going to keep getting up. Like every time that it seemed like she was going to be able to leave, Betty would stop it. And she's like, hey, I just need to make sure that she's not able to stop me from leaving here. I'm not trying to kill her. I'm just trying to make sure that she's not able to block my barricade my door, barricade me from getting out. But obviously it goes into excess because there's a rage that takes over from past childhood experiences. They then have to sort of explain the shower part of it. So she leads her to the shower, and she's just like, she just felt dirty. She felt she needed to make everything that just occurred go away. She wanted to still live in a normal life, want to do normal things one piece at a time. And so she needed to shower and then kind of just go about the routine every day. Go get the Father's Day card, go to the church, go pick up the kids, go do all of these things that were sort of normal so that she could kind of forget what occurred in that house. The one thing about her testimony, though, is that it is all sort of deadpanned and matter of fact, like she is still on her drugs. And that reads to the jury as almost like a sociopath. So Don has to kind of get some type of emotional response to show that she is at least human, that she is feeling something about what she has done. So he goes to grab the axe. He grabs the axe and he brings it to her. He's like, and this is what you use. And you can see that at that point, Candy has a visceral reaction to it. She can barely see it. She's looking, she's crying. She's like, no, I'm good. Because the judge asks, like, do you need a rest? And she's like, nope, I'm good. Let's keep going. Don needed to do that to invoke some type of emotion from her so that the jury can see that Candy does feel something about this as opposed to just being completely disassociated from emotion towards what was her friend. The prosecution kind of leans into the fact that you've been lying. You wanted to pretend that it didn't happen, and you went multiple days saying that nothing occurred. You lied to your husband, you lied to your congregation, you lied to your pastor, you lied to your old pastor, you lied to everybody. Maybe you're just a good freaking liar. And maybe that's what you're doing right now. Like, so they're kind of putting in the doubt of like, hey, you're a big time liar. This is what you do. We can't take anything that you have to say for face value. And because Betty's not here to give her side of what occurred, you're not a reliable enough of a person to go off of about the situation. It then leads into the fact that one of her sunglasses lenses ends up on the other side of the door of the garage. And she says in her testimony that the garage door was closed. She had never been in the garage. It was like, well, then how did this end up there? She then kind of says, maybe when the door was open for a bit, when I was trying to get out, the lens fell out once Betty tried to close the door. He's basically trying to say that, again, show that she's a liar. But in our recreation that we saw visually, there is a moment when the door is ajar before it is closed. But again, this is what courtrooms do. They kind of use your words against you. And if you're not completely succinct in what you say, this is what sort of happens. So again, trying to prove that she's a liar. Next up, Don wants to put Pat up on the stand, even though Pat was going to be coming later. He's like, nope, let's go ahead and do you now. Because they want to establish that you have empathy for your wife in this situation as a murderer. You don't feel like she's done anything wrong, but you should call her out for the adultery. Like we need to sort of establish that you're okay with one and not with the other, and not just some big wet blanket. And so he kind of takes the blame a little bit for the adultery. He kind of says that, hey, I wasn't there for her. I wasn't a good listener. It's like, so some of this I feel like pushed on her. And then he alludes to that Candy is one of the nicest people that he's ever met. It's like he doesn't have an angry bone in her body, and that he thanked God that in that situation, Candy was still here to be with us because Betty was severely bigger than Candy and had an axe. So he's glad that she came out of that situation. So Pat kind of just assuages that as of the husband, he is on the side of his wife, adulterers and murderers aside. Don then calls the psychiatrist up to sort of establish, to kind of look, we can say that, yes, all of this wasn't planned, but there is still 41 slashes that happened with that act. So they need to kind of get to the point as to what occurred there to make her just snap. And in that, the psychiatrist comes and says that her whole thing was after the fact to try to erase the reality. And she is trying to sort of split off and become two people in that moment. So this is dissociative reaction. And the judge kind of questions, like, is that a mental illness? He interjects, which Don does not love. Don gets into it and gets a couple of hours, another contempt charge, and more hours served right after today in jail. The psychiatrist then goes on to a childhood trauma that occurred to Candy when she was 4. And when she was 4, she was in a race with some boys, got mad that she didn't win, threw a jar at the jar, kind of cut her, and took her to the hospital. She was wailing and crying up a storm, and her mom, trying to not have her to put on this big show in front of all these people, tried to put on a good face, which is something that Candy has just done for life. Always try to be, she cares about what others think of her, probably because of what her mother has done to her. But in that, her mom was like, shh, which the psychiatrist thinks that maybe when Betty said shh, that sort of triggered her rage that she had against her mom at the same time as the fight or flight that she was having with Betty, and just caused her to just snap and became sort of two people at one at the same time. Which is why they're saying that she was able to do that 42 stabbings or slashes with the axe without really recalling it or wanting to live in that moment. That while it is the same person, there's two sort of disassociative states that are in that. Like I thought, Candy meets with Don after all the testimony, and kind of was like, well, now that I've testified, can we talk? He's like, he kind of smiles, like, yeah, we can. And she questioned him on, why did you put the axe in front of me, which I stated, and I knew, to get some type of emotional reaction, because the jury would have seen you as just like some cold-hearted so-and-so. But the other thing that he's like, we need to dirty Sully Betty's name a little bit. We need to make her come off as unsympathetic, because right now you may not come that way off. So we need to make sure that you guys are both on a level playing field. So then Don starts bringing in a trail of people to sort of put salt on the wound of Betty's grave, and kind of just pour gasoline on it and just make her seem like a bad person. Kind of make it seem like Betty Gore had it coming, which no one had death coming. But he's doing everything to make her feel less sympathetic. So he's telling people like, yeah, she was shrewdish, she was this, she was that. And the young pastor that comes in to take a congregation, he's like, yeah, Betty did not like me. In fact, she hated me. She would do things throughout my ceremonies to kind of scoff and make noises. He's like, in fact, Candy didn't like me either, but at least she was cordial. Betty let me know how much she did not like me, which is just a character witness, just kind of just crap on her, which is a thing that Don gets called on by his wife, Carol, because they were friends with Betty. And like, Betty was not the things that these people are saying. And she was like, you're going to feel this at some point in time. Like, this is going to weigh on you. Your legacy, your character, whoever you are as a person is going to be defined by this. Don throws that off like, come on, whatever. I don't need this from you right now. I need to win this case. And nobody's legacy and all that stuff doesn't matter. Alan is interesting in all of this. Alan has already found a new warm body to curl up with, and doesn't really seem to be, while he's at every case, I mean, every court date, he's sitting in the lobby, and he's watching stuff on TV. He's staying on top of it, but he seems to have already sort of checked out of it. And in a weird way, I don't want to say this to anybody, but in a weird way, this plays in this version or retelling of it, this plays as if, hey, she and I were already having issues. And while I don't want her to die because she is the mother of my kids, this gave me an out. Like, I'm able to go live my life and go do my other things and kind of sort of move on. So he's already on this next girl who, what we find out is sort of being the representation of a young woman who, I think, Elaine, who works at the church and kind of was there to console them. They have a fling. And subsequently get married and divorced. We learned that in the cards after the fact. He gets married and divorced to her. We then get closing arguments, and both the prosecution and defense, Don, they nail it. They do what it is that they're supposed to do. They pull on the heartstrings. They use each other's testimony kind of against each other. But they have really fantastic closing arguments. Don leans into the fact that this just doesn't make sense to say that she woke up that morning and went from A to B to C to D to feel like, hey, I'm going to kill Candy Montgomery. I mean, I'm going to kill Betty today. Like, it just doesn't make sense for that. Prosecution is saying she lied. She lied on day 1 after, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. She lied multiple days afterwards. And it wasn't until she got caught that she was like, oh, wait, self-defense. Something about that doesn't add up. So that's what they're both kind of leaning on. And obviously, we know, if you don't know, she was found not guilty. Before she gets to the verdict, though, she has a situation where she talks to Pat. She and Pat are having a little dinner, and she's like, I can't wait to kind of get back to my normal life so people stop looking at me in the grocery store when they find me innocent and whatnot. And Pat's kind of just like, are you, I'm here with you, but are you crazy? We're going to have to move. Like, this ain't going to be where we stay. Like, we got to leave here. No matter what happens, that jury can't find you innocent. They can only find you not guilty. And that's a very big thing. These people are still going to feel like you did something. You killed a member of this community. We have to leave here if we do that. Now, we'll deal with that when we get it. Let's just hope that we get not guilty. But staying here is not really going to be an option. There is no more like normalcy here. She's like, well, cool, I got it. They return to the courthouse, and then immediately they are told they got a verdict. The verdict comes in pretty quickly. Don runs all the way to the courthouse while the others get driven there. And then obviously we get the verdict that she was not guilty. I do find it's a little character trait. It's something small, simple, but the second she gets in the car and gets ready to pull away, she takes the glasses off. So she's done putting on this facade of putting those glasses on. So that's a small thing, but I think it's a huge character point that she's like, cool, I don't need to do this anymore. The episode ends with an 8 days later jump as they're moving. They have to move to Georgia. Sherry comes by to see the kids, and as they head out, this is wild. I feel like there's no way that this could have. Actually, there is. The way that Alan acts, there is a way that this could have occurred in real life, but this definitely plays well for this miniseries. But Candy goes to go see Alan as she's leaving. Now, I think it's weird in that Pat feels comfortable enough with his kids to have Candy go say goodbye to the person she was sleeping with. It's just they do things very different in these small towns. But she goes to see him, and Alan opens the door, and Alan doesn't have anger towards her, which is why I think Alan was just ready, like, cool, you gave me a way out. You made me open up and feel who I am as a man in a relationship with you, but you also allowed me to kind of get out of that mess. She goes to say I'm sorry and goodbye, and that she has a moment where she's like, Betty and I were a lot alike. And Alan kind of doesn't refute it, doesn't get angry, doesn't like nothing. They kind of just sit in that, which is a situation for both of them. One, she's kind of wild to be saying this to somebody she's killed and whose daughter she used to watch is in there. But Alan actually doesn't really respond to it. He's kind of already sort of checked out of the Betty-esque part of his life. But she says, I wish you a good life, Alan. And he does the same for her. And then they pull off. And that is the episode. She also, as they pull off, she is seeing the hotels that she and Alan used to have their trysts in. And then that's how the episode ends. And we get cards about what sort of occurred with everybody. I think some of the more fascinating ones is that Pat and Candy didn't last much after they moved to Georgia. They got a divorce about a year. I think they said a year afterwards, which, look, I think Pat, being the good soldier, was like, I'm a husband, being with the religions, like, I got to stay here by my woman. But I think it just became too much for him. And that thing sort of follows him. And so, yeah, they moved to Georgia, but that Candy's name still is the same. I think they might have changed. I think they changed their last names or something to kind of change up a little bit, but still, yeah, he couldn't take it and he got out of that. Like I said, Alan married that woman that he kind of was having the town hump with Elaine to kind of the next person up. They got a divorce, and then he married somebody else and moved to Maine. The biggest thing, though, is that, again, to sort of show that he doesn't care about, he's done with the Betty part of his life. Betty's parents adopted the 2 kids that he had with Betty. So he's just kind of completely devoid of that situation. Some of that might have been like, hey, I need to separate myself from all of this and just sort of start over. And this is the way that I can do that. Some of there's like, I just wanted out of the Betty thing. And this is kind of that loophole that I could take without me being the asshole in the situation. Uh, Although the affair caused it, I didn't 100% do it myself. Don is interesting in that he did continue living for a little bit. He in '86, I think he ran for governor or something like that. But the big thing is that he died by a self-inflicted gunshot wound in 1998. So he committed suicide. So who knows? This may have just been put in for literary purposes, but this clearly sat with him based on what they're saying. And I think that line with his wife saying that this is going to come back to haunt you, maybe that is what actually put him towards that edge. And the last big piece that they sort of give us is that Candy became a family therapist, which, sure, yeah, I mean, okay. I would imagine she's not using the same name, because if she was, I'm like, cool, then no. That's like going to um anybody who watches Grey's Anatomy, that's like going to Grace Sloan. I'm like, cool, this is where I'm going to go to get some great health care. Like these patients, the doctors themselves are dying in planes. How the hell would I go there? So it's a wild thing. And for a moment, I guess her daughter Jenny also was a part of her family therapy as well. But that's the episode. That's the series. I don't have anything to base it off of with the Candy Hulu series, which I think I will go back to watch now. I won't unless somebody here wants me to. I won't discuss it, but I just want to see what the differences are, to see what was more factual versus what David E. Kelley and that crew decided to write up and put in. Um, but I thought this was a fascinating story about a small time community that has a big tragic thing that occurs to it, and sort of what the law can do to help somebody get off, which by all accounts, this did feel like it was self-defense, but we only, again, are only getting the story from the side of Candy. But that makes the most sense. Talent-wise, acting-wise, directing-wise, beautiful. Elizabeth Olsen, she killed it from top to bottom. I mean, she plays almost like 5 different versions of this person, which is a lot like she did with WandaVision. But you see a person go from being this Susie homemaker, I've got this even keel, nobody can see the cracks that are underneath, to anger, to sadness, to showing the cracks, and then just being this sociopath, like this sociopathic, numb person who can't feel anything because her life has just been completely destroyed. Jessie Plemons does great as Alan, although his is more so stronger in the first half because he sort of disappears in the back half, whereas Tom Pelphrey comes in the back half. But those are sort of the yin and the yang, and then all the supporting characters work. This is a really well cast show, really well done miniseries that I think it's 7 episodes. I think the first 3 episodes, the ones that they all sort of gave us at once, I think could have been truncated probably into 1, maybe 2 episodes. I think this series would have been a little tighter at 5 versus 7, but I don't really have a problem with the road that they took us on, because it allowed us to breathe a little bit more into the Alan and Candy relationship, and that's the sort of precipice that sort of starts all of this. But I think we spent so much time seeing them do the setup, set up some more, go on dates to set up, and then actually do it, that I feel like that could have been tightened a bit. But that's the only sort of hang up that I have with the series as a whole. What did you guys think about the Love and Death series as a whole? And specifically, what did you guys think about this episode called Shh? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast by the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.